Hey everybody. Today we have an awesome guest, Cory Sandhagen. He's one of the top bantamweights in the UFC. He recently fought for the title and he's been on a win streak. He's wildly entertaining. He's got some of the knockouts of the year over the past few years. You should definitely check out his highlights if you can. But today we're going to talk to Cory Sandhagen. He's known for having a warrior mindset and kind of being like a Zen monk outside of the cage. So we're going to kind of pick his brain and learn about his mindset today. All right, let's dive in.
What up, man?
What's up, dude?
How are you?
Cory, how you doing, man?
There's a little lag on the thing. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yep, yep.
Cool. Well, man, it's an honor to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too, man. Yeah, your videos are awesome. I love all of them. They're so good. Do you do all the drawings?
I do. Yeah,
Nice.
I do them right here on the whiteboard behind me, all by hand with dry erase markers, and then I edit everything in Final Cut Pro.
Nice. Yeah, those are awesome. I wish that I could draw a little bit better than I can, but yeah, nice, man.
Yeah, well, you really embody the artist in martial artist. That's what there's certain fighters when I watch, I think about the artist aspect of martial arts, and it's like you and GSP very much embody that like ancient warrior spirit.
Cool. Thanks, man. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah. So how you feeling after your last fight?
Real good. Obviously, that was like a real good one. I think I have a lot tougher challenges ahead, so I enjoyed it for a bit, and then I'm just back to training and doing all of that stuff. But yeah, the last one was obviously really good because everyone only really remembers your last fight, not all the rest of them. So everyone's been super, familiar with me lately.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of like YouTube. You're only as good as your last video.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it the
But
same on YouTube? Not really, though.
well, you can make a complete flop and then people will forget
Huh?
if
Yeah,
you make
yeah.
a really good one next. So like my last video is just exploding. It went viral. And I'm kind of, I'm riding high right now, but the one before that didn't do so well. So I'm kind of down on myself. So it is like that a little bit. That last fight was incredible versus Cheeto. Wow. You really seemed to psychologically throw things at him that he couldn't handle. Yeah.
Yes. So there's guys. Everyone has like their own like natural abilities in fighting, and of course, but some people can't do certain things and can do other things. Cheeto can throw with like a lot of power, and he can like he just has like a way of making reads that's really particular. But what Cheeto doesn't do well is do two things at one time. So I knew that if I just threw a ton of information at him, it would be like hard for his brain and body to keep up. And that's actually like a really big, super big advantage that I usually have going into all of my fights is that I feel like I have like a really good processor. Not that I'm like smarter by any means, but I can really just overwhelm people with information and different looks and different feints and different types of attacks that can just be like a major pain in the ass to try to deal with. And and yeah, in specifically when you can't, because there are guys that can make those kinds of reads and kind of like play that game back with you, but Cheeto isn't really one of those guys. So I was hoping that strategy would work out, and it worked out like really well. So
Yeah, it really worked out. And I was nervous at the end. I was just watching some videos on YouTube. I went back and watched your Octagon interview after that fight. And it was a split decision for some reason. Like the judges almost fumbled that.
yeah, they almost messed that one up big time. That would have been not good. Yeah, there's like a number of, yeah, it's really hard because even being on the inside, I'm kind of not sure how much of weird stuff goes on. So,
Yeah,
uh,
I think even Dana White was saying that that would have been one of the worst mistakes that judges ever made.
yeah, that would have been atrocious, honestly. And I've been on like I've been on the other end of some like not the greatest decisions in my opinion. But yeah, if I would have lost that one, that would have been at the top of the list as world's worst decision in my opinion.
Yeah, the TJ Dillashaw fight. I watched that one and I thought you destroyed him. Like he looked at the end of the fight completely beat up. His face was destroyed. His leg, he couldn't even stand. You damaged his leg, and somehow was that a split decision as well?
Yeah, that one was a split. The problem with that one though, I think it just encompasses just how poor the scoring criteria is, and maybe not even the criteria, but just like the approach in general. Like the approach in general is you're scoring each into, and this is in the UFC. Other promotions do it differently. But the approach is you have 3 or 5 rounds, and each round is scored separately. So what you're pretty much doing is running 5 separate fights. So if I want to completely lose one round because I know that I'm up 4 and just completely get demolished in one round and get, beaten up worse than I beat the guy up in 20 minutes, then and he did the same thing to me in 5 minutes, it does not matter. Which is like a big problem in my opinion, because you see a lot of people who are winning on the scorecards but not winning the actual fight, and this is supposed to simulate fighting to the extent that like we can without actually like killing each other. And so to me the problem isn't necessarily in the criteria, it's in the approach. Like one championship in Asia, they do a criteria where they score the fight as one big fight. They still score each round, but um it's who won the actual fight over the 25 minutes. And I think that that would just be like a way better way to do it, because 3 to 5 rounds, like that's, you got to win 2 of them in a 3 round fight, and that's like there's a lot of like mistakes that can get made in just winning 2 rounds, so or scoring 2 rounds. So yeah, it's a big issue. Maybe one day I'll like write a bunch of stuff down and take it to someone and maybe fix the problem, but I don't have the resources to do that right now.
Yeah, I heard you and Joe Rogan talking about maybe starting the next round exactly in the same way that the previous round ended. Thought that was a
Yeah,
pretty good idea.
I think things like that would make it honestly a lot more interesting too. Like you could do so much cool stuff, but the problem with MMA and a lot of the problem with just in the actual technical piece of the sport, but also in like the scoring and all of that stuff, is that MMA has always taken things from other sports and then moved them into MMA, but only taken particular things without taking like the lot of it. So for example, like everyone talks about like wrestling and takedowns and all of this stuff. So everyone wants to score takedowns as being points, but they don't. But then they want to like ignore that in wrestling, they call you for stalling really quick. They pull you out of positions if they know that nothing can really happen or the position isn't going to keep changing. They don't pull you from that position, while in wrestling they do. They give you points for when you are able to get up, not as many points as a takedown, but they do score those as points. So it's kind of just interesting to me to watch like people try to compare it to other sports without the real intricacies of the actual like more detailed rules that need to kind of happen. Like also in boxing, boxing scored over 12 rounds and they're 3 minute rounds. That makes it a lot different because they're fighting for 30 minutes in a 25-minute fight. We're fighting for 5 rounds, so like pretty comparable, pretty close to the same amount of time. But um, in boxing, you just have so much more ability to, I feel like, score the rounds correctly when they are 3 minute rounds, and when you have 12 of those rounds to start to get it right. You know what I mean? So it's kind of weird, but MMA is in a really creative place. It like just got done being the wild, wild west, and now we're kind of like just forming civilization in MMA, and that like takes a ton of time and a lot of people being on board with stuff that they might not want to get on board with, and that obviously poses a lot of problems.
Right. Well, one thing I wanted to get into today is I think that you're kind of known for your mindset. Like if each fighter kind of had something that they're known for, like Francis is known for his big one punch knockout, Khabib is known for his wrestling. you're starting to be known for the guy with like the monk Zen mindset that can just switch it on and be an absolute killer. Um, and there's a pretty big video on YouTube about your mindset. I don't know. Have you seen it?
I watch like pieces of it. Honestly, I don't watch any of my interviews most of the time because I just like hate hearing my own voice, and I hate like I speak more freely if I never go back and watch anything. So I just mostly just do them. But I think I seen pieces of that one, and then I had to turn it off when I started talking about eating hearts, and I was like, Corey, what the fuck are you at, you know?
Well, I thought that video was pretty amazing because it tied in a lot of ancient warrior philosophy, and then it kind of paralleled those with you. And do you still have that insane like ability to switch from this peaceful guy to like this absolute killer, or have you changed?
I think I've changed a bit. I think okay, so I would almost compare this to like I guess any journey, but like in specific like Carl Jung stuff, because I am into Carl Jung a bit, where and Joseph Campbell talks about, or not Joseph Campbell, Joseph Peterson. I get the two names mixed up sometimes, but Peterson talks about like the shadow and discovering the shadow and realizing all of these things. I think that in those years when that video was made, and I was really diving deep into what it meant to be a fighter and what it meant, like deep down what it is that I'm doing, which is hurting people really bad. And so I kind of took like a really big deep dive into that for a couple of years and just tried to discover that piece inside of me, because I would attribute my first loss in the UFC, but from Aljamain, as me going into the cage with way too much peace going on, with way too much friendliness going on. And um, it was either learn how to not be that friendly and not be that peaceful and be a killer, or keep losing like that, you know? So I really dove into that for a couple of years. I think it was just part of the journey that I had to go on just as like a person, and then like developing my personality, and then like also developing like what it is that I love to do, which is being a fighter and developing that better. But I have kind of gotten away from it, and the reason that I did get away from it like I wouldn't use the word anger anymore, or like things like that when I go in and fight. I would use maybe just like a super high level of awareness, which I've been able to turn into without using anger. But anyways, the I started changing that a little bit more after I fought Song, because when I was fighting Song, or even before I walked into the cage that night, I felt really distracted by trying to get that up and to be that angry and to be that guy, because anytime a weak thought would come into my head, and by weak thought I just mean something that I didn't want, and they're like, hey, you're about to get knocked out, or hey, this is going to be hard, hey, blah blah blah, you know. I would try to like just mask that thought with getting really mad and getting really angry, and being that guy, which is fine, but that just takes like so much energy, and it's just it's not for all the time. It's for like discovering how to do that, and then like discovering fire, and then discovering how to like use fire for its purpose, which is like warming you up, not like burning your village down. So after that Song fight is when I was like, oh, okay, this is being quite distracting. So let me try not to be that far. And then I started to discover some other things. I started to look into myself some more and ask myself what it is that I needed more. And really, what I needed more in that period of my life, between the Song and the Cheeto fight, was I needed to be a lot more mindful, and I needed to be a lot more present, because uh, you know, if you this sport can be very exhausting on your brain, and it can just be a lot to deal with, cutting weight, being tired all the time, being sore all the time, getting beat up every day, and like knowing that you're going to get beat up every day when you wake up is kind of like annoying. Uh so I just had to realize that I had to be a lot more mindful. So I'm a little bit away from the pissed off guy, and I'm a little bit more on the side of just trying to wake up and be where I am and not stress my nervous system out for no reason. And just, be a little bit more grateful and all of that stuff. So I wouldn't even really call it like a peacefulness, but I think Zen is a good word for it. Where I'm, yeah, or like Wu Wei, there's the word Wu Wei, action without action. I'm trying to live in that type of way now.
Wow, you're making me think of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey there. Like you kind of went into the abyss and you discovered this darkness, but then you can't stay there forever. So you kind of have to come out and see the light again, but now you have all these new perspectives and new abilities on the other side of that. So how did you take this new kind of you took your foot off the gas of that anger? How did that translate into the Cheeto fight?
I think that translated because I was able just to make better reads. Like if we're talking about just, well, one, it helped in my life, but then two, it helped in the fight. I guess one, the way that it helped in my life is that I was a lot nicer. I was like a lot more patient. Like my instinctual, like I had like other reserves inside of me, where I could be who I wanted to be more instead of getting so stressed out, having a little thing happen, and then like, and I'm not like a really pissed off guy. I'm just I've always had the ability to be pretty aware of what's going on in my head. So it wasn't that I was like a jerk, like a giant jerk, I should say, but it was just like, man, like you don't need to be getting upset about that. But when you're in like a high state of stress, sometimes you can't really talk yourself out of those things. And so I helped in my life in that way, where I was able to like talk myself out of things like that and actually be a person that I wanted to be. So it helped in my life that way. In the actual fight piece, I think it actually helped in my performance because it helped me not listen to a bunch of silly thoughts that, believe it or not, you do have when you're in a fight. Um, I always think like I'll always tell guys that I'm coaching that they'll be like, "Hey, like, why can't I land the low kick? Like, how do I get good at the low kick?" And obviously, there's things that you can do for that. But if when once you're at like a certain experience level, sometimes the answer is stop trying to land the low kick, and like that's the answer. So in your head when you're fighting, you'll see something sometimes and be like, "Ooh, that's there. Let me take a giant advantage of that." And sometimes that's a good idea, and sometimes that's not a good idea, depending on who you're fighting. And I think that the level of guy that I'm fighting at, a lot of that stuff can be tricks and it can be setups and it can be traps. So me just catching those thoughts of, and then like even the crowd was booing a little bit, which when I look back and watch it, I'm like, oh, they were booing because they wanted Cheeto to like do more. It wasn't because I was doing less. But even hearing the crowd boo, you want to be like, okay, let's sit down on some punches a little bit, and then you have to ignore that thought. So it just made me it when you can like ignore all the stupid stuff that goes on in your brain, or maybe not ignore, but at least analyze it to an extent, you can start to decide who you want to be and the decisions that you want to make, and you're not just running on some weird like autopilot thing. And then you can actually be the fighter and the person that you want to be. So that's how that was really helpful in the last fight.
Yeah, I heard you mention that it was almost like you were watching yourself from a higher place fight. That sounds like almost a psychedelic trip or something.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. It was, I've read obviously a lot of sports psychology books in my life, and in the sports psychology books, sometimes they'll talk about the experience of people having a third person's point of view on when they're fighting, or like when they're when they're playing basketball on the court, they'll feel like they're floating above and watching themselves play. It was very much like that. Not obviously to the point of where I was like looking down and like moving the pieces and doing all of that. It was more of it didn't feel like my everyday self fighting. It felt like uh this like super present thing was fighting, and it was definitely me, but it was like a way higher, smarter version of me and a way less analytical version of me. And yeah, it was cool. It felt like I was just without any effort, just doing what was correct. And that was cool.
That performance was amazing, man. I had never seen somebody just switch things up so much,
Hmm.
and you just it was just like he was confused the whole time. You were just a couple steps ahead of him. It was really like a mind screw for him. But
Yeah.
one thing you just reminded me of. Have you heard of Eddie Hall?
No.
He was the world's strongest man, and he went to do a deadlift record that was leaps and bounds above what the previous record was. He wanted to deadlift 500 kilograms, which was like 100 pounds more than the current record. It was insane, and everybody was
Okay.
like, "You can't even get close to that. No human beings are not built to do that."
Hmm.
And he was like, he made this like huge claim, "I'm going to do this," and in all his training up to it, he never even got close. So he went to a sports psychologist and he was like, "What can I do to beat this record?" And the sports psychologist is like, "There's one way you can do this. There are instances where people can tap into like using all their muscle fibers, but it
Hmm.
has to be in the most extreme situations, like when a car is on her kids, and you hear these stories about a 110-pound woman lifting up a car and getting her kids out. And it's like, how'd that happen? You kind of have to tap into this extremely dark place in your mind. So the sports psychologist taught him how to do this, and he's like, "You can do this once."
Hmm.
And so when he comes out to do that deadlift, he's in this extreme state. It's like if anybody got in his way, he would like kill them.
Nice.
And his eyes actually changed color when he was lifting, and he completely blacked out. It's a pretty wild story, but essentially he was able to tap into 100% of his muscle fibers for like 1 second and do this
Cool.
lift. And
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm gonna watch that video. That sounds cool. Uh, yeah, that sounds awesome. I definitely think that the human body is capable of some pretty crazy shit that we've kind of lost track of just because of the modern world that we live in right now. But um, I will say that like him getting into that state, because I'm sure it was like a really dark place. Uh, I have read sports psych books where different sports are supposed to like you're supposed to be in different awareness levels or arousal levels depending on which sport you're in. So a sport like fighting, for example, has to be pretty technical and it has to be pretty calculated. So if you are in a state where like your eyes are turning colors and you're using all your muscle fibers, you're probably not going to make it the whole 25 minutes that you're fighting. So uh, that's actually really interesting and pretty cool. Um, a caveat to that would be, and I'm only saying this just because the people that listen, um, I know that I've like listened to a lot of sports athletes talk and then have them not fully describe everything, and then they'll be like, "Oh well," and I'll be on the other side of the screen and be like, "Oh well, that's how you do it," and then I'll just like follow them without having any type of uh uh like insight into what they're going through or what their sport is or all of that. But yeah, I imagine if you only have to do something for 1 second, being able to tap into that would be pretty crazy.
totally. Well, I just wanted to ask you this other question. I just Googled your name before we met,
Hmm.
and you're now being linked to Umar Nurmagomedov.
Hmm.
And I thought you called out the other guy, Mareb, after your
Hmm.
last fight.
Hmm.
Is there any validity to this linkage between you and Umar?
We're working some of the stuff out now. So until that get works out, I can't talk about it. But
Right.
yeah, we're working all of that stuff out. Some things need to happen in order for that fight to move forward. And it's going to depend kind of on whether or not the UFC is going to make those things happen or not.
Okay. Yeah. 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 Don't talk about anything you don't want to, but it seems like he's ranked pretty low, and you're like right there at the top. Does that is the rankings in your mind quite a bit when you're choosing which fighter you want to fight?
Not really. I mean, kind of, but okay. So there's like the spectacle of fighting, and then there's like fighting to me. The spectacle of fighting is very material, and it's very it's just, a part of all of this stuff that we have to do in life to like survive and make money and have like a decent type of living. But uh, the actual fighting piece to me is a pretty ancient and special thing that is inside of me. It's been like I refer to fighting as my best friend since I first started. It's been like my guide, and it's been the way that I've learned. I would say a lot of the things that I've learned in my life. It's almost been like a third parent to me. So I don't treat that thing the same way that people want me to treat the spectacle piece of it. That's why I'm not really a trash talker, and I don't really care about getting a ton of attention. Although I do like attention only because I get mailed free stuff all the time. But that spectacle piece to fighting and fighting is very different to me. The fighting piece to me doesn't involve rankings. It doesn't involve fairness and justice. It doesn't involve like risk. What it involves is a challenge, and as long as I feel like I'm being challenged and I'm fighting the best guys in the world, and I get to discover more about the art that I love and discover more about myself, I will always be okay with taking a fight. So, um, as far as the rankings and all of that stuff goes, I don't care. Like on one platform, I don't care. Sometimes you have to play the game of life a little bit. Like you have to like, or at least I have to play the and engage in this kind of spectacle thing that goes on. But like I said, that's not really fighting to me. So um, the rankings are just numbers that sometimes have significance and sometimes don't. Like if I was ranked lower, I wouldn't feel like a loser or any worse off than I am now. I just literally try to do my best. I try to learn more and more about the art that I love, and I try to just continue to learn from it so that it can help me in my life and in my future life.
That's really honorable because I
Mm.
think some fighters get caught up in the politics of the rankings, I guess, and they might not fight for years just because they're in this spot and they're gunning for this one fight, and it's not there for them. Um, so that's really respectful, and I do think that would be a really entertaining fight, even though he's ranked lower. I think there's a big amount of respect on who he is and what he's been doing. So that's going to be an exciting one for sure. What do you learn about yourself when you're in that cage?
Um, To be honest with you, man, like not a lot of the learning. Well, I guess in the earlier days, you learn a lot about yourself in the cage. A lot of the learning though happens, I think, before you go into the cage because you start to realize what you're actually afraid of. Um, or at least I do. When you're in the cage, like earlier in your career, there's a lot of question marks as far as like, oh, am I tough? Do I have that thing inside me that's gonna fight through hell in order to win? And I learned that like pretty early. Most people do, and the ones that do have that usually stick around, and the ones that don't usually take off. So that's like a big piece in being an amateur fighter and being like a lower level professional is once you get hit with some adversity, what type of person do you have inside of you really? And that's a really fun part to learn about. Right now in my fights, inside of the fights, I appreciate like the strategicness of it, like I enjoy learning about like, oh cool, I made like a really good read there. I made like I changed things up there when I should have. Like those are more the things that I feel like I learn about myself in there is that I'm a pretty good captain of my own ship now. But in life, leading up to the fight, when you're hit with like the feeling of fear, which happens every once in a while, and you kind of have to ask yourself, like, what is it that you're afraid of? And then me personally, I'll follow that whatever that fear is, I'll follow that thing all the way down the rabbit hole till I get to the bottom of it. And that's a pretty fun experience to me because that does make me really learn a lot about myself. So for example, let's take like a really obvious example. It's like, okay, well, I'm scared of losing. It's like, okay, well, what pieces of losing scare you? Because losing is really not that bad. Most of the time you don't get hurt that bad. So it's like, okay, I'm afraid of losing. It's like, all right, what is it about losing? It's like, it's going to be embarrassing, or you're going to lose your career. It's like, okay, well, let's say you do lose your career. Then what happens tomorrow? It's like, well, I guess I'll have to, have to worry about financial stress again, which is going to suck. It's like, okay, well, a lot of people do that. Are you going to like be okay or not be okay from that? It's like, okay, well, I'll probably be okay from that. And you just like keep following these things down, and you can even follow it further than that, like way further than that, where it can be like, oh, well, what stresses you out about financial, or like what stresses you out about a job, and then follow that down the rabbit hole. And then you'll learn a lot of shit about yourself doing things that way. But you have to do it in a way where you're not just trying to like silence all the voices. You have to try to, figure out why those things are happening so that when they do happen again, you can talk yourself down from them a lot quicker.
I think that's really valuable to do that, because if you explore the worst case scenario, you find it's actually not that bad. Like, a lot of people are scared to start a business or something because they think, oh, if I fail, I'm not going to have any money. And then you go to a country like Costa Rica or Thailand, and you see people living on the beach off of $1 a day, and you're like, this seems like a pretty good life. If I had no money, I could come here and do that, you know?
Yeah, yeah, we're very caught up in the money thing in the U.S. Unfortunately, I'm not a religious guy, but I do think that there is a ton of value in some of the things that have been said throughout the religious world and history. And one of them that I really like is this idea of the seven deadly sins. Like I forget what they are, but it's like greed, lust, like laziness. There's seven of them, of course, but conquering those things, I think, is really important. Like those are the things that are outside of the material world that I have more fun in experiencing and living in that type of world where it's like, let me not try to mess around with winning shiny gold things and winning money and living a life. Like I have more than, I'm not like wealthy, but I've made way more money in fighting than I ever thought that I would. And that's like, so it's like, man, like what do like you don't need to get caught up about the money thing, and even when I was like broke trying to make it to the UFC, I really wasn't concerned with the money or anything like that. So anyways, I try not to live in the material world. I try to live in that like maybe notch that's in a different place, where it's like, oh, okay, I'm not gonna try to make myself rich. I'm gonna try to make myself conquer greed, where I'm gonna try not to be greedy. I'm gonna try not to be lazy. I'm gonna try not to have a ton of pride about who I am and all of that stuff. Like those are the things that are really interesting to me in life. It's not gaining stuff as much as it's me trying to make myself a really solid person without all of that stuff.
Yeah, I think that's such a great mentality. It's kind of like you're reverse engineering what people normally strive for. You like people kind of look at the world as, okay, what thing makes me money? I'm going to go do that thing. And you can kind of reverse that and say like, what can I contribute? What will help the most people? What will bring the most value to the world? What do I love doing the most? Let me do that thing, and then I'll figure out how to get paid for it. And usually doing that thing, like just doing whatever brings the most value will make you a lot more money. The money kind of just comes in as a byproduct of that.
Yeah, I would almost even take that one step further and say that, like, even if you don't make any money from it, who cares? Like, I mean, it matters, but it only matters as much as you kind of let it matter. I had an experience when I lost my first professional match. I was 5-0, probably about to get signed to the UFC if I won, and I lost. Like, I honestly, like, I choked. like just didn't fight good, like wasn't there. It's not that I like got finished or anything, thank God, but I just fought like shit. And I remember after that experience, I went through like a whole wormhole of like who am I, my identity, all of this, because I think I was 23 or something. And you know, when you're like a 23-year-old person, you're still really caught up in the ego and the identity that you had to create for your whole life in order to learn how to survive. So that like kicked me out of that and had me like asking a lot of questions. But I remember asking the question to myself and I was like, hey man, like, okay, you could lose the rest of your fights for the rest of your life, which would be horrible and probably not going to happen. But if that does happen, you're not going to have any money. And I was like, okay, if I don't have any money, I'll probably live outside somewhere. And I was like, well, would you live in a box if it meant that you could still do this every day? And I was like, yeah, I think I'd live in the box. Like if it meant sleeping in my car in the back of the gym, I would still do it because at least I would get to wake up and then walk into the gym and do something that brings me a ton of love and like a ton of value in my life. And I like actually meant that. Like if I if things wouldn't have gone the way that they went for me in my career, I would be living in a box, sleeping in the car in the back of a gym, and I would still go into the gym every single day and do what I love. And that helps a lot decide um you know, just how much you love something, which I know is really difficult for a lot of people to try to find. I was just lucky in that I found it, and then I like knew that I found it. Um, so I know that that's like not an easy task is to find that thing, but I think when you do, like as long as you get to do it, there's more value in that than making a shitload of money.
Totally. You're making me think about my own after school journey. I've had to kind of reinvent myself multiple times.
Mm,
And before I was doing after school, I was a freelance animator, just kind of doing gigs for money. And
mm,
that got really dull. And eventually, one of the jobs went horribly. I did all this work and didn't get paid. So I kind
mm,
of had to look at myself and be like, why am I doing this? Like I'm doing all this art to just make this one guy happy and he just like screwed me over and didn't pay
mhm.
me. So why don't I make videos to help people and about things I'm actually interested in? And over the years, I've kept refining that into now it's almost like a very selfish endeavor. I'm basically just making videos on the things I'm interested in for
Cool.
myself. And like literally, if it got no views, I learned about something that I really was interested in and I
That,
made the video completely for myself. It's kind of like the ultimate selfishness is the ultimate selflessness. You know, you like you do it for yourself and if it really resonates with you, it's going to resonate with other people, right?
yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's the approach that I take to fighting too. Like, you know, I don't care a ton whether or not people think what I'm doing is interesting. Like, luckily it is. But I take the same approach to fighting. It's like, nah, this is what I like. These are this is how aesthetically I like it to look. So this is what I'm gonna make it look like.
That's awesome. And some of those knockouts you have are like art. It's a piece of art. Like I love Frankie Edgar, but you know, he's a great guy, but what you did to him was just like it was a master. It was like looking at a beautiful painting.
Mm.
And do you ever go back and watch some of those knockouts that you've done and just see it for as like a piece of art almost?
Yeah, sometimes the knockouts are always cool, of course. I really like watching me like just fight in general. Like I don't like watching my interviews like we kind of already talked about. I don't like I don't like a lot of things. I don't even really like watching a lot of other fighters. There are some that I like, but not a lot of other ones, but I do like watching my fights. Like I do think that they're really interesting and I do think that they're really entertaining at least to me. So yeah, I'll definitely watch them and look back and be like, man, like you're getting better, you know, like that's cool. You're getting a lot better.
That's awesome. Who was your favorite fighter growing up?
I had a few. I always liked the lighter guys. So I really when I got into MMA, it's when Jose Aldo, Dominic Cruz, Uriah Faber, Donald Cerrone, all of those guys were in a promotion called the WEC. And that's just because that was really the only station that played MMA, or the only promotion that was on my cable TV during that time. And then I got into the UFC a little bit afterwards, and of course, it was during like Matt Hughes, Chuck Liddell, Tito Ortiz, Rashad Evans, GSP, Rampage. It was like during that whole era. Uh, and that was like a really fun, interesting era to be involved in too, or not to be involved in, but to be involved in as a fan, I guess. Um, so, but it was like those initial WEC guys, like Jose Aldo, Cruz, Faber, all of Cerrone. It was all of those guys where I was like, oh, okay, so fighting isn't just like a bunch of bullshit. Like fighting is like actually has right things and wrong things. Like that was a really cool, interesting thing. But yeah, I used to stay up really late and watch it, and I just really loved it. You know, it was like and then when I went into the gym for the first time, I remember being like, oh, okay, yeah, yeah, this could be fun. You know, like this could be fun. And then I was just like, I don't really care to fight or whatever. But then the hobby turned into like a couple competitions, and then that got me kind of hooked, and then it turned into obviously where I am now.
That's great, man. Yeah, and who knows who you're probably inspiring a whole another generation of the next wave of fighters. My
Hmm.
my first guest on this podcast was Rashad Evans.
Oh, cool.
Rashad talked to Rashad a lot over the years, and he actually inspired me to even start this thing because
Nice.
I never really had an intention to start a podcast, and Rashad's like, start a podcast. I'll be your first guest, and I was like, you can't say no to Rashad. And like, so I was like, all right, I'm going to start a podcast and just have conversations with people like you. And it was so cool to talk to Rashad. And he's so like spiritual and thoughtful,
Hmm.
and he reminds me of you. And you guys are buddies, right? Like you guys are
Oh,
working on the project together.
yeah, yeah. So we work for a company called Umbo, or not, I guess not work for, but we're involved in a company called Umbo, which is like a mushroom supplement company, and they have like a number of products that are just really high quality and all of that stuff. But yeah, so I do that, or I am involved with that with Rashad. I think Rashad's a lot more involved than I am. And yeah, so we do that. We cross paths every once in a while, um,
That's
but
great,
yeah,
man. I
yeah,
have a box of the Umbo bars. They're so good. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
they give you a lot of energy. The lion's
Nice.
mane.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah,
Good.
I've been kind of mushrooms are kind of a hobby of mine. I've been growing lion's mane and oyster mushrooms, and I like to go foraging. Yeah. Do you ever go foraging out in Colorado?
No, I don't do that much outdoor stuff as much anymore, to be honest. Um, I started reading like a lot more books, so I don't really, like I kind of get that like quiet time in reading books now instead of being out there. Um,
Hmm.
no, I've definitely been out there. Actually, one time I was out there, and you know the red mushrooms with all the white dots on top.
The Amanita muscaria.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're supposed to be like psychedelic ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I went into a field. I was hiking a 14er one time. I went into a field in the beginning, and I'm not kidding you, dude. They were like everywhere, like a whole field full of them, which was kind of crazy. But I don't know which ones are okay to eat and which ones aren't okay to eat. But
Yeah, those ones they are psychoactive, but they're not like the really high, lovely psilocybin ones. Those ones
mm,
need to be like curated. You need to boil them, or they're actually connected to Christmas and reindeers because the ancient shaman would reindeers would eat those, and then they would pee out the psychoactive compounds, and then they would drink the reindeer pee,
oh,
and then they would trip. So there's this weird connection with those mushrooms and Christmas because they're kind
oh,
of like they grow under pine trees, and that's
uh-huh.
what the Christmas tree represents with the red
Oh,
presents at the base of them. Is it's a tree with red mushrooms, at the base of it. That's kind of where we get that tradition, and it's weird. We get a lot of other Christmas traditions from those mushroom rituals that started in Siberia, and yeah, it's pretty trippy. I did a whole video on that specific mushroom and the connections to Christmas and all the little traditions we get from Christmas that we don't have explanations for can be explained by those mushroom rituals. It's really funky.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So are you into psychedelics and psychedelic exploration?
Not really, honestly. Like, I'm not like a mushroom guy. But maybe one day in my life it will be a big part of things. But no, no, right now, man, it's like I don't have a lot of other interests other than I like reading some books every once in a while. I like going to the gym, and when it's funny, like when the UFC camera guys will come and they'll be like, "Well, what do you do?" And I'm like, "This is what I do, man." You know, like I don't really hang out too much with my friends because I see them pretty much every day at the gym. And literally, I feel like just clock hours at the gym, and then at night when I come home, I watch like shitty dating shows on Netflix, and then I go to bed and I wake up and I do it again.
What is it about the shitty dating shows that is that kind of just like a release?
I think a part of it is a release. I think another part of it though is that I'm like interested in people and like the way that they act in certain situations. So I do like seeing people just in like really confrontational situations, and then seeing like how they act and how they get solved. And then I also really appreciate like the way that they talk to their friends about the experience that just happened. Like that's really interesting to me too, because it's like usually not really what happened. It's a totally one-sided story of it. And I don't know, I just like that stuff because I feel like I know a lot of it is fake, but I think a lot of the ways that those things get handled are real in life. And so it's more of like a psychological study that I'm running on on all these fake actors.
That's so funny because I'm kind of the same way where most of the day I'm like listening to Carl Jung type content or like
Mm.
audiobooks that are really, you really have to use your conscious mind to absorb the material. And at the end of the day, you kind of just want to sit back and watch some trash TV, but there is a lot to be learned from it too. You can learn from anything.
Yeah, it's entertaining. I think it's super entertaining. Like I don't like other shows. Like I really just like reality television for some reason.
Oh, it's the best, man. Jersey Shore was my favorite show for 10 years ago.
Yeah,
So,
speaking of JWoww was actually at the fights a couple weeks ago.
oh, did you
Uh,
meet her?
no, I mean I don't care about who she is now, but before it would have been like in my college days, if I would have met JWoww, that would have been pretty cool.
She doesn't even look the same. Yeah, she
Uh,
looks completely different.
yeah, she looks a little different. I could like still notice it was her though.
Okay, right on, right on. I got a whole list of questions here. I'll try to run through another good one. So here's one about psychology. How do you psychologically break an opponent?
Mm, I don't know. I think that there's that I think is more done in the fight versus before the fight for the most part. Because I feel like most of the guys that I compete against now are pretty savvy to all of just the bullshitty like pre-fight stuff. Like we all kind of understand that that's just a stupid part of the game, or at least stupid for me. Some people enjoy it, but I would say though that something that I do a little bit more than I think probably my peers is when I do watch the guys that I'm going to fight their interviews, whether they're past interviews or current interviews, I'll listen really closely to the language that they use, because I do think that that can reveal a lot of things about the ways that they think, and then the things that they're scared of. And I like to know those things going into a fight. Like for example, if like everyone not everyone, but a lot of people just, uh, if they're not even asked about things, will just start saying like, "Oh yeah, like I'm in great shape. I had like a great camp." You know, like sometimes they say typical stuff, but then every once in a while they'll be like, they'll say something that's really specific, that and like how well that really specific thing went, you know? And that to me just reveals that that's something that they think about. And if it's something that they think about, it's either because they don't have that thing or they're trying to mask that they have that thing, or it's true. But I will like give that a lot of thought, if that makes any sense. Like if a guy is like, if I was just talking to you and I was like, "Yeah, man, and my wrestling's really good now," you'd be like, "Why the fuck did he just say that?" You know? And those types of things, it's like, "Oh, okay, so that must be on your mind a lot." So you're either self-conscious that it's not good enough and you need to say that out loud so that I hear it, the opponent of yours hears it and then thinks that that's the case, when typically I think that that's not the case and they're just trying to mask a insecurity.
That's absolutely brilliant. I think that's a brilliant technique, and I think you really hit the nail on the head because people sometimes they use words to cover up a behavior that they're trying to hide. So
Mhm.
words are sometimes used as a mask or to fill in a hole that they have. And yeah, we overcompensate with our words to kind of like balance things out. I mean, just this last week I went camping and I stumbled upon this kind of like this commune out in the middle of nowhere. And I was like, "Oh, this looks cool." And they had uh like a kiosk at the front. And I was like, "What is this place?" And the guy at the front was like, "It's not a religion. It's not a religion." You know, he said it's not a religion like 3 times. And I was like, "Sounds like a religion." And he kind of got like really like, and, you know, like he kind of overcompensated with his words saying this wasn't a religion. And I was like, and I just, you know, I was making fun of him, but it really like, he was like, "No, no, no, it's not a religion."
Yeah. Yeah,
So
that's I think that that's totally a thing, you know, it's like it's a weird thing that we do when when we get to talking too much.
yeah, yeah. So are you very careful with your words then?
Yeah, I lie a lot. Uh, and it's only just so that, not a lot, but I'll like mix in lies with like the truth. Just because why not?
Wow. So
Yeah.
it's more to throw off your opponent than because you're not really, are you getting anything out of the lie?
No. I only lie, and I'll specifically lie to people that I know that they're close with, because I know that everyone's, you know, like I know who's involved in which circle for the most part, and I'll just tell that person something that isn't true because I know that they're going to go report it back to the opponent. And I'll do this a lot too, not with my opponents always, but with like some of the guys that I coach. You know, like I'll do that for them too. So I'll do that a decent amount, but again, like I'll mix it in with the truth just so that people know, or people can't pick up on it too much. But yeah, and I also like thought about, and I used to keep that to myself now, but now I like saying it out loud so that if people do hear that, then they don't really know what to think of me. And I think that the more ambiguous and the more mysterious I can make myself, the better off I am. And I think that I've done a pretty good job of that for the most part, of just being like this kind of off character that people can't get a really, they can't get like a big read on because he doesn't partake in a lot of the other typical things that people partake in the sport. And so I try to continue to remain that character.
Totally. That reminds me of ancient warfare techniques, you know, with Sun Tzu or Genghis Khan. You know, Genghis Khan used to do this thing where he would appear very weak, where he was extremely strong, and he
Mhm.
would lure his opponent out of their stronghold. And then right when they thought they were doing great, all of a sudden they're completely surrounded, and he would just obliterate all of them. And
Yep.
you know, you gotta you gotta appear weak where you're strong. You gotta appear strong where you're weak. So it's brilliant.
Yep, similar ideas. I can only take them so far because we're not actually doing war. I always think it would be really cool to be like a general in actual war, like a Napoleon or something. Like I think that that would, because that's like almost straight strategy, right? Like that's like the combat piece is important, like the physical one-on-one combat piece is important, but the strategy piece is really cool. And I think that like beautiful strategies are really awesome.
Wow, do you ever think that you were born in the wrong era?
uh no, I think it would be cool to be like, I think it'd be way cool to live in like a more simple time where those were like war now is like everyone has nukes. So like you can only get so crazy, you know? But I think that I mean I do like have you ever read the 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene?
Mm-mm, I'll check it
Uh
out.
yeah, that's a super fascinating book. Um that book got me really interested in figuring out how to beat people without having them know that you're beating them. And that's just an interesting thing for me in life, is just figuring out how to win like underneath what, so that people don't get offended, and like that's like fun for me.
Yeah, I love the lessons that you get from martial arts. You learn, and they translate so well outside of martial arts. Like I've been doing jujitsu for a little while,
Cool.
and my coach just taught me this amazing lesson last week where I was doing this pass, and I wanted to get to the full mount, and I was in a really good position, but I wasn't in the full mount yet. And the guy was struggling, and he was like kind of trying to bench press me off him.
Mhm.
And the coach was like, hold on, don't try to pass him. He's wasting all his strength right now. Just wait. You feel him pushing, just smile and feel his strength wane and wane and wane. And you got, don't rush things when you don't interrupt your enemy or your opponent when they're making a mistake. Basically, I
Yeah,
was like,
sure.
oh my God, that's genius. I need to take that, into all aspects of my life.
Yeah, yeah, nice, that's a good one.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about Aljamain Sterling for a sec. So the first fight, what did you learn from that first fight, and how would you fight him differently?
Against Sterling.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just the whole don't be super low awareness, or like physiologically I was just like way too low. I also will give Aljamain a lot of props and just like who he is as a fighter, and where he was in his career versus where I was in my career. Experience is way more important than my words can make it sound. Experience really, really matters, and it's really important. And Aljamain had a ton more experience than me. He had been through a lot more adversity than I had been through. He had been through bigger fights than I had been through at that time, and that's why he won, in my opinion. I think that his skills are definitely really good. I hope to test myself against him again. I really believe, though, that the reason that he won that fight is because he was just a more experienced and more battle tested warrior than me, which I mean in the most complimentary way possible, because I do like Aljamain. So yeah, I think that that's what I would attribute that to. Um, and and I'm grateful that it happened, because it made me like way, way better. I'm glad that I only got choked out and not knocked out in that fight, and got to learn a ton of stuff. And then like I really like falling and then rising again. Like that's like fun for me. Uh because it means that I like have some of this. And so that was like fun for me to learn about myself, where it's like that, because that was heartbreaking. That was like devastating to me. And I was really glad that I figured my shit out, got it together and then put on a couple wins. I beat TJ, so and then fought Jan on short notice. So even though the history book is going to say I won two and then lost two coming back, I think that I was really proud of the way that I was able to bounce back from such like a devastating heartbreak in my life.
Yeah, you really did well after that. I mean, you just kind of like, I think the public perception of you has gone up and up and up.
Mm.
Even though it may not have all been wins, I think in the public perception, it's been wins. Because like, even after that TJ fight, technically you didn't get the victory, but the public perception that you won was so strong that they were like, we want to see this guy fight on the biggest stage,
Hmm.
in the
Hmm.
baddest division in the UFC. It's like pretty cool. You're in the top promotion, fighting promotion in the world, and you're in the baddest division. It's pretty insane.
Yeah, I'll reflect on that sometimes. It is super cool. It's going to be way cooler for me to look back and say that than it is for me to be existing in it right now because like I said, like right now 98% of my life is just trying to get better in all the facets that are going to help me continue to win and so that's more of where my focus is, but I think it is going to be a really cool thing to reflect on when I'm retired.
Yeah. Is retirement something that's far off in the way future, or when do you know when it's time to hang it up?
Okay, so I told myself like a long time ago, if I get knocked out too many times, I'm done. Like I've been fortunate enough; I've only been dropped once in the UFC. I have a very safe style, and I'm like pretty responsible with my defense. So, God forbid I do get knocked out a couple times, I'll probably call it. Just because I'm not really down for having a bunch of brain problems later in life when I could have just retired a little bit earlier. And so that I think when if I ever stop enjoying it, which is really hard for me to even fathom, then I'll be done with it. Or if I'm just like I'm at the age now where I'm starting to like feel the injuries starting to catch up to me, where they're not like debilitating yet, but I imagine that I can only be that way for so long. So once that becomes a thing, then I'll probably done with it. Pretty much anything that's going to stop me from doing what I'm doing now, as far as how hard I can train and how responsible I can be with the amount of effort that I'm giving to my training camps and to the fight. If that ever changes, then I'll be done. Because I don't want to do like a 90% of a camp. Like I want to make them perfect every single time. So until I can't do that, then I'll be done.
Mm, yeah, there's certainly some fighters that it's kind of hard to watch. That they were like my idols, and then they kind of go out on this note where you're just like, like I love Shogun Hua so much, and his last like four fights were just, he could have retired a while ago, and his stock would have been just as high. But these last four fights were like, oh, ouch. But
Yeah,
I think everybody still respects him, but it was a little hard to watch.
yeah, I agree with you. That's why I thought about that too. Like I think that's even makes it more important for you to like take advantage of all of the awesomeness that is happening right now. Uh, in particular for me, just because that might be me one day and everyone's going to think I'm like a scrub, you know, like, which is okay with me because at some point that like no one can last forever. But I am going to make sure that I'm like embracing all of the, whatever is happening right now. And then later I'll embrace whatever's happening then. But I think that almost speaks to why fighters and people just in general should just really, really be super into the all of the great stuff that's going on right now because it definitely will go away one day.
Totally. Nothing lasts, so you gotta enjoy the ride. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's kind of like a balance between enjoying the moment and also like preparing for a better future. It's like
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. Well, I think this has been a great conversation,
Yeah.
and I'm really like, you're my favorite fighter in the UFC. I tell everybody that,
Oh,
and
thank
I think the hype around you is just growing and growing, and I'm so excited to see your next fight, man.
Cool, man. Thanks a lot. Yeah, I appreciate you having me on, and yeah, it was a nice chat, and I appreciate you saying that I'm your favorite fighter. That like means something to me. That's like a pretty cool thing. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah, man, you really embody like this Zen monk who is like can switch it on to be an absolute warrior. I love that.
Cool.
Yeah,
Thanks,
you and Rashad both.
man. Thank you.
Yeah. So with this podcast, I'm kind of just making it up as I go, and I really appreciate you coming on. So hopefully we stay in touch, and let me know if I can ever do anything for you.
Cool. Yeah, we will be, man. Thank you. I'll
Yeah.
talk.
Peace, man. Appreciate you.
Peace. Later.